Inheritance is for blood, not strays. That was the sentence that sliced through the room like a knife, landing right between my ribs before I even understood she was talking about me. My aunt didn't raise her voice. He never had to. She just said it with that practiced softness of hers, the kind she reserved for insults she wanted to sound like facts. And she said it while I was standing right there in front of her, handing her the teacup she asked for. Before you watch, take a breath, because this is the kind of story that reminds you how one sentence can change the entire course of a life. Stay with me till the end. You won't forget what happened next. I felt the heat of the cup seep into my trembling fingers, but my face remained still. I placed it on the table, quietly, deliberately, because I refused to let my hands betray even an ounce of what I felt. At 68, I have learned that silence is often the sharpest response a woman can give. And that day, silence was my shield. The room itself felt too warm, the old heater in the corner releasing that faint metallic smell it always had in winter. A rosemary candle flickered on the coffee table, its scent mixing with the faint aroma of the apple pie my cousin's wife had baked earlier. The house was cozy, decorated for the season, warm lights, knitted throws and family photos lining the walls, but her words sucked the warmth right out of it. For a moment, even the hum of the heater felt accusing. My cousin froze mid-laugh. His wife did too, her smile fading as if someone had pulled a string from behind her cheekbones. I watched the shock ripple through the room, but no one said anything. No one ever corrected my aunt. Not when she made cruel jokes, not when she crossed lines, not when she stepped all over people just because she could. And certainly not when she decided who belonged in this family and who didn't. She didn't look at me immediately. But she lifted the teacup first, inhaling the steam like she was enjoying the moment, as if she had rehearsed this little performance for weeks. Only when she took her first sip did she finally raise her eyes and meet mine. There was no shame there. Only satisfaction. A quiet, smug certainty that she had delivered a message she believed I needed to hear. The clock on the wall ticked once, loud, commanding, before I finally spoke. "All right," I said. Just that. 2 simple words, delivered with a softness I knew she wasn't expecting. Her eyebrow twitched barely, but I caught it. She had expected me to break a little. Maybe protest. Maybe cry. Maybe retreat to the kitchen like I used to when her words cut too deep. But when I didn't, something shifted in the room, barely noticeable but real. A silence settled in, the kind that unsettles even the most confident people. She leaned back on the sofa, adjusting the sleeves of her fancy sweater. I noticed the bracelet on her wrist, a delicate gold band with small stones embedded in it. It looked expensive. Probably was. And for some reason that detail anchored itself in my mind like a seed settling in soil. "I'm only being honest," she said, patting her daughter-in-law's knee like she was delivering wisdom rather than cruelty. "Of course," I replied, my voice steady, almost gentle. I didn't raise my eyes yet. Instead, I focused on a small thread unraveling on the edge of the knitted table runner. I curled it slowly around my finger, grounding myself in the motion. I knew better than to react. I had learned over the years that reacting was exactly what she fed on. What she expected. What made her feel powerful. But what she didn't know, what she could not possibly have imagined, was that her sentence didn't land in an empty heart anymore. I had spent years silently keeping records, listening, observing, learning where every weakness in her world lived. And now, with one single insult, she had unlocked a door she didn't know existed. A secret she would regret provoking. "I didn't mean anything personal," she continued, though we both knew she absolutely did. My cousin's wife fidgeted with her sweater sleeve. My cousin looked away completely. I stayed still. "It's just that family is family," my aunt went on, "and we must protect what belongs to us." That word, belongs, clung to the air like smoke. I knew exactly what she meant. She'd used it for years whenever she subtly hinted I owed her for letting me stay close after my mother passed away. She liked reminding me I wasn't her daughter. I wasn't her burden. I wasn't her priority. And she loved declaring who did and didn't deserve things in this household. I slowly lifted my eyes at last, and the moment our gazes locked, I saw her confidence flicker. Not much, but enough to tell me she had expected a different reaction. "You're right," I said softly. The softness confused her. She wasn't sure if it was agreement or defiance. And uncertainty was something my aunt never handled well. "What do you mean?" she pressed. "I mean you should protect what belongs to you," I answered, tilting my head slightly. You've always been good at that. There it was again, that tiny twitch in her eyebrow. She didn't know what I was implying, but she sensed something was off. I could see her mind working, trying to decode my tone, my expression, my posture. She searched for clues, but I gave her none. Because that was my hidden advantage. Not my voice. Not my silence. Not even the years I had spent pretending to need her approval. My advantage was knowledge. Knowledge she didn't know I had. Knowledge she didn't know I had kept. Knowledge that, if used correctly, could unmake everything she cherished. And her arrogance had just given me permission to finally use it. I'm glad you understand, she said slowly, still unsure but unwilling to show it. I nodded once, letting the moment stretch. The candle flickered again, casting a dancing shadow across her face. A small, uneasy shift passed over her expression. A knock on the window broke the tension for a second. It was only a branch tapping against the glass, stirred by the cold December wind, but it was enough to make her jump. I pretended not to see it. I'll get more tea, I said, turning toward the kitchen. Don't bother, she replied quickly, perhaps realizing she didn't want me out of sight just yet. Just sit. We're talking. We weren't. Not really. She was lecturing. She always lectured when she felt insecure. We just want to make sure everything is fair, she continued. Fair for the family, I mean. Fair, I echoed, tasting the word like something bitter. She clasped her hands together, a gesture she used when she tried to appear calm. The bracelet slid slightly down her wrist, catching the light. I watched it again, noticing how much it shimmered. Beautiful. Expensive. And probably purchased with money she claimed came from her own hard work. I felt a strange calm settle over me. A deep, steady certainty that surprised even me. I folded my hands in my lap, letting my fingers interlace slowly. Do you feel you've been fair to me? I asked quietly. She blinked, once, twice, caught off guard by the question. I've been more than fair, she replied defensively. I've helped you in ways you don't understand. There was the narrative she loved. The story she told everyone, including herself, that she had lifted me up, that I owed her my gratitude. I didn't argue. I didn't need to. Instead, I leaned back slightly, letting my shoulders relax. My calmness darkened her confusion. Is something wrong? She asked. No, I answered. Nothing at all. But something was wrong. Something she would feel soon. Something she sensed, barely instinctively, but couldn't yet name. I let the silence grow until she shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. My cousin coughed. My cousin's wife looked at the wall. I finally stood, slow and steady, my knees cracking softly with age. Her eyes followed me, uncertain, uneasy. I'll be right back, I said. And before she could respond, I stepped toward the hallway. I didn't go far. I didn't need to. I only paused by the doorway, half turned toward her, letting the light from the hallway illuminate my profile. I met her eyes one last time and said the sentence she didn't understand yet, but would. You've given me a lot to think about today. Her expression tightened. Her fingers curled slightly against her knee. The bracelet on her wrist slid again, catching the dim light. Something in her understood, on a level too deep to articulate, that the conversation had shifted into dangerous territory. She just didn't know why. Not yet. But she would. And when she finally realized what she had started in that living room, it would be too late to undo anything. Because the sentence that began with cruelty would end with consequences she never imagined. And this was only the beginning. I'll be right back, I had told her. And I did walk away, but only far enough for her to wonder what those words truly meant. As I stepped into the hallway, I heard her shifting in her seat, restless, like someone suddenly aware the ground beneath them was changing in ways they couldn't yet see. I didn't go upstairs. I didn't leave the house. I simply stood at the end of the hall, letting the air settle around me. My heart wasn't beating fast. In fact, it hadn't felt this steady in years. Her sentence, her cruelty, had stirred something in me I hadn't touched in a long time. A boundary. A strength. A clarity. And that clarity stayed with me when I woke the next morning. It was barely dawn when I opened my eyes. The bedroom was cold, the kind of cold that settles in old houses overnight. I reached for my robe and wrapped it tight around myself before moving toward the window. A pale gray ribbon of light stretched across the horizon, soft and thin, promising a morning that hadn't fully taken shape. But I didn't wait for the sun to rise. I walked straight to the kitchen, the floorboards creaking softly beneath my slippers. The house felt different, quiet in a way that wasn't peaceful but expectant. As if even the walls knew I was about to do something I had postponed for too long. My phone sat on the counter where I'd left it the night before. I picked it up, feeling the cool surface against my palm. The digital clock on the stove read 7:14 a.m. Her words echoed again. Inheritance is for blood, not strays. I didn't wince this time. I didn't replay the scene. I simply let the moment guide me to the next step. I scrolled to the number I had kept saved all these years. The bank officer who handled the loan she had begged me for. He wasn't an old friend. He wasn't even someone I particularly liked. But he was efficient and that mattered. I pressed call. He answered on the second ring. "Good morning, Mrs. Turner," he said, his voice professional and clipped as always. "How can I assist you?" "I need to activate a clause on a loan," I replied. My voice didn't shake. Not once. There was a slight pause before he responded, "Of course." "Which clause are you referring to?" "The repayment demand." He inhaled sharply, the sound barely audible through the line. "That will go into effect immediately." "I know." "Are you certain you want to proceed?" he asked, his tone shifting just a little, a mix of surprise and caution. "This will create consequences." Consequences. If only he understood how deep those consequences ran. "I'm certain," I said. "Please move forward." He didn't argue further. He knew better. There were documents, signatures, terms, things my aunt had skimmed without reading years ago, assuming my kindness was endless and my memory selective. "I'll process it now," he said. "Thank you." When I ended the call, I stood there for a moment, phone still in hand, staring at the soft morning light spilling across the counter. It felt surreal, how something so monumental could be set in motion with a 30-second conversation. I made myself a cup of tea, breathing in the warmth as I sat by the window. The steam curled upward, disappearing into the cold air. I brought the cup to my lips and took a slow sip, letting the quiet moment settle. The notification arrived at 7:23 a.m. A small vibration. A simple sound. Yet it marked the first crack in her foundation. I opened the message. It was a confirmation from the bank. They had initiated the repayment demand. It included words like immediate, binding, obligatory, and non-negotiable. I read it twice. My hands didn't tremble. My chest didn't tighten. There was no guilt, no fear, no second thoughts. Only a sense of alignment, like I had finally stepped into the life I should have been living years ago. By 7:40 a.m. another notification appeared. A failed auto payment from her business account. I rubbed the rim of my cup slowly with my thumb. I knew this wasn't the disaster, just the first pebble rolling down the hill before the avalanche. At 8:05 a.m. my phone began buzzing, not from her but from the bank. They sent more automated alerts, each one confirming what I already knew. Her business couldn't sustain even a fraction of the repayment. At 8:20 a.m. my neighbor Mrs. Harris walked her dog past my window. She waved as she always did, but paused when she saw the look on my face. I smiled back, a small calm smile that I'm sure confused her. She tilted her head slightly as if she sensed something unusual. But she didn't ask. I appreciated that. By 9:12 a.m., my phone flashed with a message from an unfamiliar number. A supplier. Payment overdue. Requesting confirmation of continued partnership. I deleted it. At 9:27 a.m. my cousin called. I let it ring out. Then he texted. "Did something happen? Mom is freaking out." I didn't reply. Instead I stepped onto my porch, letting the cold air hit my cheeks. The world outside was quiet. The neighborhood still waking up, birds hopping across the lawn, a car starting somewhere down the street. Then I saw it. Her car. She drove faster than usual, her hands gripping the wheel, her eyes wide even from a distance. The tires screeched slightly as she pulled into her driveway across the street. She didn't even close the car door all the way before rushing inside. She had gotten the notice. I went back inside my house and placed my teacup in the sink. The warmth had faded, but my resolve hadn't. At 9:52 a.m. the first call from her came. I watched the screen light up with her name. I didn't answer. A second call followed immediately. Then a third. By the sixth call my phone began to feel heavy in my hand. Not because of the weight, but because of what those calls represented. Years of entitlement suddenly meeting the reality of accountability. I placed the phone on the kitchen table and walked to the window. Her front door flew open and she stepped outside, phone pressed to her ear, pacing, her movements frantic. I could tell she wasn't used to panic. Not real panic. She was used to being in control. Being respected. Feared. But fear was on her face now. Raw, unfiltered fear. At 10:31 a.m. my cousin sent another message. Mom keeps asking if you talked to the bank. He says she needs to see you now. I turned off notifications. I wasn't ready to speak to him, not yet. There was a time when I would have dropped everything to help him, but that woman had shaped him too. His silence the previous day had told me everything. He would defend her even when she was wrong. At 11 a.m., a soft knock echoed from my front door. I didn't open it. Not the first time. Not the second. Not the third. Finally, her voice cracked through the wood. Please. I need to talk to you. For a moment I stood behind the door, my hand resting on the knob. I could hear her breathing, fast, shallow, unsteady. The scent of her perfume seeped faintly under the door, mixed with the cold draft from outside. But I didn't open it. Instead, I stepped back. One step. Then another. Her knocking grew louder, desperate. Please. Something's wrong with the accounts. They're saying a clause was activated. I closed my eyes for a brief second, not to stop myself, but to steady the quiet strength rising in me. She pounded once more before her voice softened into something unfamiliar. Can we talk? She whispered. Not yet. Not today. I walked toward the back of the house, letting the door stand between us like a boundary carved in stone. Minutes later I heard her footsteps retreat. Slow. Heavy. I peeked from the window once she reached her house again. She didn't know it yet, but her world had begun unraveling the moment she uttered that sentence yesterday. And now the consequences were stretching their fingers into every corner of her life. By noon more notifications arrived, each confirming the same truth. Her foundation was breaking. All I had done was remove the support she had taken for granted. The day wasn't over yet. Not even close. But she had felt the first real tremor. And I hadn't even said a word. I stayed by the window for a long moment after she walked back across the street, her shoulders slumped, her steps uneven. She didn't look like the woman who just yesterday had sat on that sofa dripping confidence and superiority. She looked smaller, almost fragile. The kind of fragile she never allowed anyone to see. And yet, rather than satisfaction, what I felt was something quieter. An odd, steady acceptance that the shift had begun. A shift she had created completely on her own. I pulled the curtains closed half an inch, letting a thin line of winter light spill onto the rug. My hands were cold, but my mind was strangely calm. The house was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock above the mantel. It was a slow, steady sound that mirrored my breathing. I stood there a moment longer before turning toward the kitchen, determined to make myself a warm lunch. I wasn't hungry yet, but I needed the normalcy of simple routines. As I sliced a piece of bread, my phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't rush to check it. I finished what I was doing, placed the knife down and washed my hands under warm water. When I dried them and finally glanced at the phone, another message from my cousin lit the screen. Mom says we need to talk. It's serious. I didn't reply. Instead, I placed the phone face down on the table. At my age, I've learned that responding in haste rarely leads to anything good. Silence, on the other hand, reveals people's true intentions. It couldn't have been more than 20 minutes before I heard a car door slam across the street. I peeked through the curtain again. A delivery truck. Not the large kind, just a single van service vehicle. The driver walked toward my aunt's door holding a stack of envelopes sealed with fluorescent red stickers. Urgent notices. He knocked. She opened the door almost instantly, snatching the envelopes from him with shaking hands. Even from my window I saw the color drain from her face. She tried to smile at the driver, but the expression cracked halfway, like porcelain with a hairline fracture. He gave her a short nod and walked away. She closed the door behind her, but I could still sense the panic rippling through the walls of her house. Panic has a sound, an energy, that carries even when no words are spoken. I sat at the table again, biting into my bread. I didn't need to watch every step of her unraveling. I had my own emotions to untangle. The truth was, despite everything she had done over the years, Despite the insult that finally tipped the scale, a small part of me felt sad. Sad for what she could have been. Sad for the woman she chose to become. Sad for the relationships she had crushed under her own pride. But sadness doesn't erase consequences. Another hour passed quietly. I folded laundry, watered my plants, wiped down the counters. Normal things. Steady things. The kind of things that bring peace to a restless mind. But peace didn't last long. Around 1:45 p.m., I received a call from the grocery store where I shopped every Thursday. I answered thinking it might be a courtesy reminder about my pharmacy refill. "Mrs. Turner?" the young cashier Mia said. I thought you should know something." She sounded nervous. "What is it, dear?" "I'm not trying to get in the middle of anything," she began, "but Mrs. Lowell, your aunt, came into the store about an hour ago. She looked really upset. She was crying actually. And she said some things." I remained silent, waiting. "She said someone betrayed her. Someone close. She said her business might be in trouble." I closed my eyes briefly, letting her words settle. "She left without buying anything," Mia added softly. "I didn't know if I should call you, but she looked unwell." "Thank you for telling me," I said gently. "I appreciate it." After I hung up, I stood in the center of my kitchen, letting the silence stretch again. The heater clicked on, pushing warm air into the room. I wrapped my arms around myself, not because I was cold, but because her panic had stirred a strange ache in my chest. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't regret. It was recognition. Acknowledgement of a truth I had ignored for too long. Her world was cracking. And she wasn't prepared. Later that afternoon, I decided to take a short walk. The sky had turned a muted silver, heavy with clouds that threatened snow. I slipped on my coat and scarf, then stepped outside, inhaling the crisp air. Winter has a way of sharpening a person's senses, and mine felt unusually alert. As I reached the sidewalk, I noticed two of my neighbors, Mr. Wallace and his wife, standing by their fence, deep in conversation. When they saw me, they waved, but something in their expressions shifted. Curiosity, concern, maybe a touch of gossip. "Afternoon, Margaret," Mr. Wallace called out. "Afternoon," I replied, stopping politely. His wife stepped closer, lowering her voice. "We heard there was some trouble at your sister-in-law's place earlier. Everything all right?" I gave a small, non-committal smile. "I'm sure she'll handle whatever it is." They exchanged a look that suggested they knew more, or at least suspected enough. Rumors travel fast in small neighborhoods. "Well, if you need anything," Mrs. Wallace said, "don't hesitate to ask." "I won't," I assured her before continuing down the street. I walked slowly, letting my feet find their rhythm. A few houses down, I passed a woman pulling weeds from her garden beds. She glanced up, greeted me warmly, then hesitated before speaking. "I saw your aunt earlier," she said. "She looked upset." "I heard," I replied simply. She dropped her purse right in the middle of the sidewalk. Papers spilled everywhere. I helped her pick them up. She didn't look herself. I thanked her and moved on. The world was noticing her cracks long before she would ever admit they existed. When I returned home, another car I recognized was parked across the street. Her business partner's. He stood on her porch, arms crossed tightly across his chest. His face was red, his jaw clenched. I watched from my window as he knocked, then knocked again, louder. She eventually opened the door, but only a few inches. He leaned in, his voice tense, though I couldn't hear the words. She shook her head repeatedly, her fingers gripping the edge of the door like she feared it might fly open. Then, unexpectedly, he placed a folder on her doorstep and walked away without looking back. She dropped to her knees, picked up the folder, and for a long moment she didn't move. Her head bowed, her shoulders shaking. She looked like someone who had just realized they were standing in a house that wasn't cracking anymore. It was collapsing. I stepped back from the window, not wanting her to sense me watching. As evening crept in, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea and sat near the fireplace. The flames flickered softly, casting warm shadows across the room. I pulled a blanket over my knees and allowed myself to breathe. Deep, slow breaths. My hands trembled, not from cold, but from a lifetime of suppressed emotions that were starting to surface. I didn't hate her. Not really. But I couldn't save her anymore. Around 6:10 p.m. the doorbell rang. Once. Then again. I stood, my heart thumping softly, not in fear but in bracing for what I already sensed. When I opened the door, my cousin was standing there. His face pale, his hair disheveled, his hands jammed into his coat pockets. "Aunt Margaret," he said, his voice cracking, "we really need to talk." I stepped aside but didn't speak. He came in slowly, glancing around the house as if searching for answers in the furniture. "She's falling apart," he whispered. "I've never seen her like this." I nodded once, waiting. "I know you had something to do with this," he said, meeting my eyes. "I don't know what, but I know you." For the first time I saw something in him I hadn't seen in years: respect. Maybe even fear. A flicker of understanding that I wasn't the fragile, dependent woman they'd always assumed I was. "Can you fix it?" he whispered. I looked at him, steady, unblinking. The cracks in her world were no longer small fractures. They were widening, spreading, deepening. And she wasn't the only one beginning to realize what that meant. But fixing it? That wasn't the question he should have asked. And I wasn't ready to answer the one he should have. And I wasn't ready to answer it. My cousin stood in my living room for a long moment, his hands shoved in his pockets, his breath unsteady. The lamp beside him cast a soft golden light that exaggerated the tired lines around his eyes. He looked older than he had yesterday. Worn down in a way I had never seen. And yet, beneath that exhaustion was something else. A frustration he didn't know how to name. "Aunt Margaret," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper, "we need your help." I didn't move toward him. I stayed by the armchair, my fingers resting lightly on the fabric. I could feel the warmth from the fireplace behind me, but my hands were cold. "Sit down," I told him gently. He hesitated before lowering himself onto the edge of the sofa, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. He didn't look at me at first. Instead, he stared at the floor as if the answers he needed might be hiding in the wood grain. "She won't tell me everything," he said. "I've asked her, but she just keeps saying things aren't adding up. That people are turning against her. That she's being punished." Punished. He said the word like it was too heavy for him to hold on his tongue. I walked slowly to the kitchen doorway, not leaving the room completely but giving myself space to breathe. The kettle on the stove caught my eye. I clicked it on without thinking, letting the water warm as I leaned against the counter. "I went over there earlier," he continued, "and she was surrounded by papers. Letters. Notices." She kept saying none of it made sense. I closed my eyes for a moment, not because I regretted anything, but because hearing it echoed through someone else's voice made it feel real in a different way. Tangible. Immediate. "She wouldn't listen to me," he said, finally lifting his head. "But she might listen to you." The kettle clicked off, breaking the quiet. I poured hot water into 2 cups, letting the tea bag steep. My hands shook slightly, not from fear but from the weight of everything he wasn't saying out loud. I carried the cups into the living room and placed his on the table in front of him. He murmured a soft thank you but didn't drink it. "What are you asking me exactly?" I asked. "I'm asking you to talk to her," he said. "To explain what's happening. To calm her down." "Calm her down." I repeated, my voice flat. "Is that what she needs?" He swallowed hard. "She's terrified, Aunt Margaret. I've never seen her like this." I sat across from him, folding my hands in my lap. The steam from my tea curled upward, forming soft ribbons that faded into the air. I stared at the cup instead of his face. "Does she know I know?" I asked. He frowned. "Know what?" I didn't answer. Instead, I took a slow sip of tea. It was too hot, but I let the heat settle on my tongue anyway. He leaned forward. "Aunt Margaret, did something happen yesterday? Before everything started? Did you two argue?" "No," I said truthfully. "Then why?" "She made a choice," I interrupted, meeting his eyes. "And choices have consequences." He went quiet, absorbing that. I didn't elaborate. Not yet. He wasn't ready to hear the truth. And she wasn't ready to face it. Not until she understood what her actions had cost her. He rubbed his forehead with the palm of his hand. "She keeps saying she's losing everything. That everything she built is falling apart." I softened my voice. "And what do you think?" He hesitated. I think she took too much for granted." That was the closest he had ever come to admitting his mother wasn't perfect. I felt a small shift in my chest. Something loosening. "Will you come with me?" he asked quietly. I stood and walked to the window. The streetlights outside flickered on one by one, illuminating the thin layer of frost forming on the ground. The world looked cold and brittle, like it might shatter if touched. "I'll come," I said quietly. "But I won't lie to her." He nodded, though I sensed he didn't fully understand what that meant. We put on our coats. The air outside was sharp, slicing across my cheeks as we stepped onto the porch. His car was parked at the curb, engine still warm from his earlier drive. He opened the passenger door for me, something he hadn't done since he was a teenager. A small gesture but meaningful. The car ride across the street lasted less than 10 seconds, but it felt longer. He drove slowly, as if buying himself time, though there was no avoiding what waited behind her front door. When we reached her porch, he paused before knocking. His breath came out in small white puffs. "Be gentle," he murmured, as if speaking to himself rather than me. "I didn't promise anything." He knocked softly. After a moment, the door opened just enough for us to see her eyes. They were red, swollen, exhausted. She looked at him first, then at me. The shift in her expression was unmistakable. Fear mixed with pride, confusion mixed with anger. Emotions she didn't know how to hold all at once. "You came," she whispered. I stepped inside. The living room looked nothing like the polished, controlled space I had seen the day before. Papers covered the coffee table. Envelopes lay scattered across the rug. A folder, the same one her business partner left earlier, sat open on the sofa, pages fanned out like limp wings. She closed the door behind us. "I don't understand what's happening," she said, her voice trembling. "Everything is falling apart. My accounts, my orders, even the office phone won't stop ringing." I glanced at the papers. Past due notices. Contract terminations. Account discrepancies. A familiar bank seal. But one envelope caught my eye. It was addressed not to her business, but to her personally. She followed my gaze and moved quickly, scooping it up as if ashamed I had seen it. "It's nothing," she said. "It's not nothing," I replied. She looked away, clutching the envelope to her chest. I don't know what to do. There was the truth she had never spoken aloud. Not to me. Not to anyone. She didn't know what to do. Her voice cracked. "You've always handled things. You've always helped me." I let that hang in the air. Because it was true until it wasn't. She approached me slowly, as if stepping toward a delicate wire she wasn't sure she could cross. "If I did something wrong," she whispered, "tell me." My cousin stood silent behind her, watching, waiting, afraid of the answer. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lecture. I didn't lash out. I simply told her the truth she had avoided for years. "You built your life on people you thought you controlled," I said softly. "And now those people aren't holding you up anymore." She blinked hard, tears spilling over. "I didn't mean what I said yesterday," she insisted. "I was angry. You meant every word," I interrupted gently. "You just didn't expect the world to reflect it back at you." Her lip trembled. "Are you punishing me?" I inhaled slowly. "No. I'm letting you live in the world you created." She sank onto the sofa, trembling. For the first time, she didn't look at me as someone beneath her. She looked at me as someone she finally saw clearly. Someone who had power she never acknowledged. "Help me," she whispered. "Please." I took a step forward, then stopped. "Before I help you, I need you to understand something." She looked up, desperate. "This isn't sudden. It feels sudden to you because you never looked beyond your own comfort. But these cracks started years ago." Her breath hitched. "And they didn't start with the bank. They started with how you treated people. How you treated me." Behind her, my cousin lowered his head, his shoulders sagging beneath the truth. A long silence passed. Heavy. Necessary. Finally, she whispered, "What do I do now?" I didn't answer yet. Because before she could move forward, she needed to face one more truth. The deepest one. The truth she never expected. And I knew exactly how to bring it to light. She looked at me with her breath trembling, whispering, "What do I do now?" And I knew the truth she needed was the one she had spent her whole life running from. I stepped closer, slow and steady, feeling the weight of years settle between us. "You start," I said softly, "by admitting what you've done." My voice was calm, but the air around us tightened as though the walls themselves were listening. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her shaking hand. My cousin stepped forward, looking between us as if afraid to breathe too loudly. His eyes were tired, full of confusion and fear, but he said nothing. This moment wasn't his. It's all falling apart, she whispered again, but this time her voice cracked so sharply that it almost startled me. Everything I've built. Everything I've worked for. You didn't build it alone, I said. You built it on people. On favors. On the assumption that no one would ever push back. Her head dropped as she sank deeper into the sofa. I shouldn't have said those things to you, she murmured. I didn't mean them. You meant every word, I replied gently but firmly. You just never expected those words to matter. For a long moment she didn't speak. The room was quiet except for her uneven breathing and the faint hum of the heater struggling against the winter cold. Papers still covered the coffee table. Contracts, notices, warnings. All the pieces of the life she fought to control now lay scattered like fallen leaves. I need to know what's going on, she said. Tell me what this is. Tell me how it started. You know how it started, I answered. You simply chose not to see it. Her fingers curled weakly against her knees. Please, she whispered. Just tell me. And so I took a breath, a deep, steadying breath, and delivered the truth she had never expected to hear. You remember that loan you begged me for? I said quietly. The one you needed to keep your business alive? She looked up, eyes wide, realizing something she had never bothered to examine was finally catching up to her. I never begged, she said, defensive even now. You did, I replied. You called me crying. You said you'd lose everything if I didn't help. So I helped. I gave you what you needed. Then I stepped aside and let you take the credit. Her lip trembled. I thought we were family. We were, I said. But you treated me like an accessory. Someone to lean on, not someone to stand beside. Her breath hitched. So this is about the loan? It's about what you built on it, I said. And what you did after. I walked to the coffee table and picked up one of the notices. You were living comfortably off money you never intended to repay. You knew the terms, but you assumed kindness meant permanence. My cousin swallowed hard, sinking onto the arm of the sofa behind her. Mom, he said quietly, did you really borrow money from her? She didn't answer. He didn't have to. He looked at me ashamed. Why didn't you tell us? Because she wasn't the only one who benefited, I said softly. You all did. And I didn't want resentment to poison the parts of life that were still peaceful. He lowered his head. She leaned forward, gripping the edge of the sofa. I didn't think you'd enforce it, she whispered. We're family. I thought. You thought wrong, I said not unkindly. You thought I was someone you could wound without consequence. Her face folded in on itself, grief mixing with humiliation. I never expected you to do this. I knelt slightly to meet her eyes. You never expected me to have boundaries. She shook her head slowly. I'm losing everything. You're losing the things you took, I said. Not the things you earned. She choked back a sob. I stood up again, letting the truth settle. My cousin's face drained of color as he looked around the room, finally seeing the reality his mother had tried to hide. The unpaid bills, the warnings, the collapse. All of it. He turned to me. Can you stop it? He whispered again. Can you fix any of this? His tone was different from before, less accusatory, more hollow. A man watching his world fall apart, wondering if the person he'd underestimated all his life could put it back together. No, I said gently. Not anymore. He blinked rapidly, trying to absorb that. His mother's voice broke the silence. Please, help me, she begged, reaching toward me with trembling hands. I can't do this alone. You were never alone, I replied. But you chose to make everyone feel like they were. Her hands fell into her lap, defeated. I walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. A thin sheet of snow had begun to fall outside, drifting quietly onto the dark street. The world looked soft and silent, a stark contrast to the storm unraveling inside her home. You said inheritance is for blood, I said, still looking outside. You said I didn't belong in this family. You said your world was yours alone. She didn't speak. So now, I continued softly, your world is truly yours. Every part of it. Even the pieces that are breaking. Behind me she sobbed, openly, uncontrollably. The sound echoed through the room like something collapsing in slow motion. My cousin stepped forward, his voice shaking. How do we start fixing this? You start, I said, turning back to them, by facing the truth without pretending it's someone else's fault. He glanced at his mother. She sat frozen, her shoulders shaking beneath the weight of everything she had ignored. You built a kingdom on borrowed foundations, I said. And now that the foundation is gone, the kingdom can't stand. She covered her face with her hands. I never thought you'd let it fall. You never thought I had the power to let it, I said quietly. Silence followed. Cold, heavy, absolute. I moved toward the door. My cousin rushed after me. Wait, he pleaded. Are you just walking away? I'm letting what needs to happen, I said. For the first time. She looked up, tears streaking her cheeks. So that's it? You're leaving? I paused at the door, hand resting on the knob. No, I said softly. I'm stepping out of the role you forced me into. Her breath trembled. And what role is that? The one where I carry the weight of your choices, I replied. I opened the door. A gust of cold air swept into the room. My cousin looked at me helplessly. Can we fix anything at all? Yes, I said. But only after she admits the truth, to herself, not to me. He turned to look at her. She couldn't meet his eyes. I stepped outside, feeling the cold snowflakes land on my coat. Behind me, through the partially open door, I heard her whisper something so quietly I almost missed it. I don't know who I am without control. I turned just enough to respond. Then now is your chance to find out. Her sob broke the air like a fragile branch snapping under winter weight. My cousin stood between us, torn. Will you come back? He asked. When she stops asking me to fix things, I said, and starts asking herself why they broke. He nodded slowly, understanding more than I expected. I walked down the steps, the snow crunching under my boots. The street was quiet, lit by a single flickering street lamp. Behind me, the door closed with a soft, hollow sound. Her kingdom had finally fallen. Completely. Irreversibly. Not because I pushed it, but because she built it without ever checking the cracks. For the first time in decades, I felt the weight leave my shoulders. And the final truth settled inside me like a steady flame. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply stepping away. And letting the consequences finish what you never had to start. If this story touched your heart, don't leave without joining this community. Subscribe for more emotional first-person stories of revenge, justice, and strength. Because every woman deserves to be heard.